Folks may continue to come in. It was kind of instructive that when people were told we were going to do this in the church, some people didn't think this is what we meant. It's become church. I think that's a good sign that we've inhabited the Great Hall in a way that's feeling like church more all the time. I thought I would begin. We haven't used our the prayer we were praying a lot during our campaign that kind of pulled together some of the reasons why we're taking these efforts. So let's start our time with the prayer, with the campaign prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy God, you call us to make your love visible in the world around us. Give us wisdom and courage to meet this moment with generosity and with hope, that we may grow in your loving kindness and show forth your compassion in our community with renewed faithfulness and boldness through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. And I'm going to read these couple of verses from Isaiah that were also crystallized some of this because I stumbled upon them and I was happy to find them again. They still seem to apply. The verses were from Isaiah 60. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice. So this image of shining, of arising, of embracing folks coming in, the folks who helped us put the campaign together said this expresses a lot about what your goals are in here, which is to turn physically in the way that we've turned our hearts toward our community and our neighborhood. How can our buildings help us do that? How can they be accessible and inviting in ways that are in line with who we are? So what we want to do today are a couple of things primarily. I mean, the biggest thing is to give you a chance to see where we are and ask your questions, because a lot of people are going to be curious about different aspects of what we're doing and what's going on here. Part of it's to be in this room so that you can actually this was the late breaking news at the announcements last week when David kind of was waving at me in the corner, jumping up and down and said, let's do it in church. And then we figured out how to do it. I really appreciate Bernie and Sam and Alejandro and Robin who figured out how to get this to happen in here. It will be recorded, but it's not live streamed this instant. That was the piece we couldn't. It will be posted later so that everyone will have access to the questions and what we do here today. But it's not live streamed right now. So with regard to specifics, I'll take you through some things, and then Margaret and David and Charles are here if you have more specific questions. Margaret has really drilled down with Mary and others in the kitchen. Charles, all things church, historically and architecturally. David has been the leader of the project who can really help us if you have curiosity around, especially probably phase 2, which I'll describe what that is in a few minutes. So let's start. Anybody remember this evening? In fact, there's Anna right on the corner. Anna and Peg and a few others threw us a great party at the Botanic Gardens on January 6th. And when Catherine and I were meeting this week, we're doing some staff annual planning and whatnot with each staff member. She's like, I just realized that was this year. That happened this year. Does it seem like a long time ago in anybody else's lives? How much has happened in Calvary or in your life since January 6th? It's still August, folks, somehow. But we had this phenomenal gathering to kick off the congregational aspect of the campaign, and it really felt like a coming together of Calvary that was really important. The next day, we ran out of service sheets at church. We thought everybody would have got their tickets punched the night before and nobody would be in church, but we had to find seats for people. So it was a really beautiful evening that kind of energized and reconnected us in a lot of fantastic ways. So most of what I want to talk about is what's happened since then and where we're headed as well from here. But I just put that up to kind of anchor us in time. Before that, we had a ton of back work that happened that we'll allude to as well, but that was an important moment. So, all right, let's see here. It worked just a minute ago. We're also going to take a little bit of the view from above. Not God's necessarily, just like we're going to back up 2 steps. What are the big picture things? So here's a quick narrative of what happened with regard to the plans themselves. I'm not going to go all the way back to pre-pandemic when we started conversations about what we wanted to accomplish, but in the summer and fall of 2022, primarily what we're talking about today is the construction itself, okay? So the campaign also included an organ renovation, architect's fees, engineering fees, things we're going to do with the city to figure about the alley, other things. But so we're really just talking about the costs of the physical construction right now, right? So we built that campaign on an estimate of $6 to $7 million for that aspect. That's what and that was not shot in the dark. That was informed by what we were told by contractors those prices ought to be, just last fall. In late January, right after we had that joyful party out at the Botanic Gardens, we got harder numbers that said 9.3. That was almost 50%. So we just folded up shop and we went home, and no, we didn't do that. So that was a hard thing to hear, right? For the group that had been planning on it, the folks who had planned the fundraising, we pivoted like we've been doing for 4 years and asked the question, how do we achieve our goals? How do we do the work that we know we want to do with our buildings and meet our budget? Same time we had the fundraising, we hit 94, in a chaotic economic year, I'm really proud to say that we hit 94% of our goal, our primary goal for the fundraising side, but we didn't shoot past it when the stock market dropped 20%, and so we didn't have an extra pile of money hanging over here. So we rebudgeted. We really need to get that number down closer to $5.5 million for the construction. That's a challenge, right? 9.3, we got to get to 5.5. Okay, it's gonna turn out okay, I promise. So how do we get from 9.2 to 5.5 and stay friends? That's the guiding question, right? And the question we really asked is, what can we leave alone? That was the first question, right? What can stay put, and what are the expensive pieces that if we leave put, how can we work with those? So, what is this room? This is the first quiz question of the day. Orgel room. Orgel room, excellent. So we actually showed this picture in a forum in May. No, we showed this picture at the end of March. So between the end of January, architects got busy with the concept that initially it was David's insight that said, what if we left the orgel room essentially alone? An earlier iteration had a two-story entrance from the south, right? That you walked into a large atrium. Okay, if we can get people into the existing orgel room, we can simplify the project quite a lot. We can keep the alley entrance that won't be an alley anymore, as our main entrance from the other side. A lot of things could stay put. Brilliant idea. We still have, so if you can visualize, I'm standing in the door of the orgel room in that main hallway looking into it. Does that make sense? I'm looking west, just to orient you. So we still have an inviting central hall. That was super crucial. We still have a chapel space over here on the southwest corner that's glass to the courtyard eventually. These are children's classrooms. Instead of a glass block wall, we can actually see what's behind them. This is currently just a wall, but you can see by just pulling a few walls down, same ceiling, we're able to actually bring all of this second floor space into this central hallway. So instead of being in a rabbit warren, having no idea where you are in these buildings, we start to orient ourselves. Brilliant simplification of the project that can still achieve our central goals. Here's another. Why do people with these things always point them at the screens when they know that's not where? This is another view of the same room, but now we're looking into the wall, into the mural room, right? So a sense of how how ministries like Waffle Shop or just like parish dinners can work when we actually have some natural light and some places here rather than the salmon swimming against each other in those narrow hallways going down to the kitchen right now. So right around here is still going to be our hallway down to the church to really reconnect these buildings. I'll show you some other plans as well. But that basic insight to say, what could we keep simpler? Take that south entrance off. That basic insight, I'm going to add to the campaign one more we're going to do. Get one of these. That basic insight got us from 9.3, what did I say here? To 7.3. All right, so we're halfway there. From 7.3, we've got to get down to 5.5, and I'm going to take you through what we did from there. Right, so we got halfway there with changing the structure, simplifying the structure. What else is there? Well, surprisingly, the church costs were within budget. It was about $300,000 of that great big number were this. That's primarily because we're improving it in some amazing ways, but we want the church to stay the church. A lot of it is that we're refinishing surfaces, and I'll tell you more about what we're doing up here in the chancel in a minute. We took out the third and fourth floor from the scope. So we were renovating the third floor for a couple of adult classrooms. The fourth floor was going to be, we're moving most of our storage up there. Youth were going to be up there. Bells were going to be up there. Those are simple spaces to kind of partition off, prepare for later development. And what we learned about in the process was when I went and talked to Jeremy and the youth kind of wanted to be on the third floor anyway. So when we get the choir robes out of the way, they're going to be able to have some say in how that space gets renovated. But we might be able to do that with our own contractor at a lower cost along the way. So that was take some big square footage just out of scope to bring us closer. We removed all the exterior work, not because it's not important. It is, and we hope to get there, but some of the work that we can do later is what's outside the walls of the building, right? We can't very easily do the interior work that everything kind of hangs on. So let's put a pause on the outside until we find a way to do that work, and including the porte cochere. We can even still enter under that under the awning as it is now for a while, and do that at a later time. We simplified the basement renovations. I don't know if you really realize that we are standing on top of the basement that goes down that hallway past the kitchen, right? The old chapel is in that area, and there's a little network of rooms in there. We were going to tie those together pretty elegantly on paper, how to make a good flow for the clothes closet and those ministries. It was going to go back into here. Looks great on paper. It ended up being quite a bit more expensive to renovate the basement than to renovate the church because of all of the structural issues they ran into with that. So we went back to it, especially with getting plumbing over to some new showers. So simplified that, got new floor coverings, got new paint, got new lighting, and we're working on the possibility of a handicap accessible bathroom in there as well, but we just put showers in Welcome Inn. So we did actually achieve our goal of having showers on site that can be used for whatever ministries we need. The other part of that that'll be important is to make sure that outreach, they'll probably need access to the chapel space. That was going to be shared space, but we're going to make sure they have access to that for outreach ministries all the way, every day. The last one was to simplify the library in Montgomery Foyer, which you wouldn't necessarily have known this, but there was a lovely concept to have a two-story library because the old rector's study is kind of trapped on floor 2.5. It would never get, the old rector, maybe he liked it that way, I don't know. There's no way to make that space accessible, so we were going to use it to make that room more beautiful, but when we got the costs were broken out, we said, that's okay. We can still make a good room that functions well in that place and bring this kind of back into scale. Any on the committee can actually correct me if I'm So let's talk about this room, especially since we're in it. And y'all can ask questions as we talk through what's going to happen. This is the one you can visualize most how it's going to evolve into the next iteration of the Calvary Church we know and love. These renovations are going to go from July through November of this year. They've told us by the end of November they will be finished. Promised. Scout's honor. That's what they said. So they will be. This is the picture, if you do blueprints, picture of the space, right? This is our chancel up here. It may be easier just to look at it right here in the plywood and the 2x12s. But the concept was to make our chancel accessible to all kinds of people for the first time in Calvary's history. So pretty elegantly, Terry Bird Eason helped us with a basic design, which is to tuck a ramp right here where Sam is on the other side of the pulpit that will get someone who has mobility issues up into the chancel for the first time. The ramp is not there, but the hole's there. Sam's where the ramp's going to be. The second was that these broad steps across the front instead of the knee walls that were formerly there, kind of dividing the choir from the rest of the congregation, so that both has an opening, welcoming architectural effect doing this. It also acoustically lets more of the voice of the choir make their way out into the room. He said even those little walls would have been kicking some of the sound back into the choir instead of out here. The font in an earlier iteration was going to go to the back, part of our simplification, and even the priests gave in, right? This is the liturgical thing. The second place he recommended was over here. It still ties it to an entrance. You can see it in blue tape over here if you're curious when you leave. It still ties the font to a place where people come and go from the church, which is the symbolism of having it at the back of the church. It's our entrance into the community. It's the ritual that brings us into the center of the Christian faith. And it also, I have heard the cries of my people, it makes it easier to see at baptisms. They don't have to turn around. So the font is over here, broad steps here, and a ramp. The second area, we'll talk about this. So we'll talk about this other in a minute, because this current scope that by the end of November stays in this room, right? Any work basically beyond the doors of this room, that allows us to move back in here for Advent and Christmas and be back in our space before we tear into the rest of it. What are other? We have the pews will be altered in a few spaces so that we have places for wheelchairs that are not just the penalty box up front. Did you know that? If you had mobility issues, you had to sit, like Mark, you had to sit on the front row. Well, nobody wants to sit on the front row, as far as I can tell. So we will have a couple of front row spots. These will be shortened. There will be a couple of halfway back, and there will be a chair back here to make sure that the prime seating, which we know is the back row, is available for a share as well. Something that's not shown on this is that the screens in the back will be shortened, made half, and pushed against the back wall to do two things. As Charles has liked to say, they right now they offer the illusion that no one can hear you when you're talking back there before church, but you're actually in the same room. It also allows folks all the way at the back of the church to see. So we can actually use the whole church as we spread the pews out for modern humans sizes and lose a few pews as we do that. So they'll sit right back here. Those will be refurnished by a furniture maker. I'm going to pause for a second after having run through the church. Questions on this project? There are other little pieces. We're going to have the ceiling cleaned for the first time in however many years. 100. The ceiling wasn't high in the original church, but it's been there since the late 1800s, so that'll be nice. We're going to get paint. We're going to spread the pews out. All the floors will be refinished. Oh, let me say one more thing. And this is actually helpful and kind of instructive as to how these projects will continue to unfold. The original plan for the chancel was stone, and we thought we were still going to come in under budget with the stone allotment. But we knew it waited on actually tearing it up and seeing what the structure held. And the second was just to see what stone was available. It's a trickier choice than one might think because we have marble up here and oak flooring down here. And so the stone in between those two really had to be exactly right to work well. It needed to not compete with the altar and not look like we were trying to make it look exactly like that. So the first samples they brought out just didn't work. It was uniformly. And this is how this works. I don't know if you ever remodeled your house. Then they brought out the really expensive sample. And it might have worked, but even the really expensive sample that would have been, even that one needed treatments to figure out how to get the color, the right color, and there were questions about what does that mean going forward with regard to maintenance and whatnot. Well, the contractor already said, you can save $22,000 if you go with oak. Okay. And then the contractor said, and also it's going to be $18,000 more to get the stone that you like and you want. So now we have a $40,000 gap or more. We reached back out to our consultant and said, what about the acoustics? Is there anything we could do with the finish? Charles called him with regard to the acoustics. If you add a layer of plywood, of 3/4 plywood, glue it, screw it, you end up with a mass that behaves like stone. You end up with a very thick mass of wood that's all becomes one piece, and it's quite a bit cheaper. It will look beautiful. It'll maintain our Carpenter Gothic wood warm church that we have and save us a lot of money. So that's kind of an example of some of the decisions that are out there along the way that I really appreciate the way the committee has weighed the pros and cons. The church is a place where we would have found those resources if we felt like it was the right next thing to do, but the combination of the aesthetics of the church and the acoustics in this other way into that made sense that we can stay on track with regard to our budget and have a beautiful chancel that honestly will feel more visually like the Calvary you're used to because wood is what brings the warmth into this room. So if we can get those choir voices out into the room in that way, we're thrilled. Okay, now I really will start talking. Questions about this segment before we turn the corner? Yeah, Fred.
Wait.
Is the main entrance still planned to be in the orgel room? I was confused on that.
So, yes, good question. And I'll get more in that in phase 2, but the main entrance will still be the door we come in right now on the alley. So we don't have to add an expensive new addition to announce where the new entrance is. But instead of walking that long, dark hallway, as soon as you get in, on the left will be glass entrances into the offices. So there will be a few feet into that hallway, and it'll be wider, and the light from the orgel room will be open, like drawing people to the center. So that was the way that we could still pull people into the center to orient themselves or to the offices and make that work. Does that make sense? How that was one of those big cost savings? And I'll show you some pictures of that too to show how it flows in just a minute. Church questions. Yeah. Jan.
Let's talk about the bride's walk.
Okay, I will show you a picture or at least give me 1 minute and we will talk about the bride's walk. Yes. The organ? Yeah, the other question, so the organ has stayed apart. We had $1 million budget for the organ. That's not one that we could start lopping off, ranks. They're going to have it all out and off. So the organ is in Boston, being restored as we know, and all of the parts came back. Thanks be to God. Yeah.
And how will communion work?
Oh, good question. Primarily the same way. The nice thing is that anybody who's an EM knows that it's one-way traffic behind the communion rail. You kind of have to do this thing. The communion rail will be our rails, but they will sit in front of the step. So these folks will have room to move behind it. It took a little bit of room out of the chancel, so that's why we extended the front. Communion can still go like this, down the ramp on that side. We're going to widen this tiny step on this side, like as you do right now. We'll still have a floor. Even though it's accessible up there, we'll still provide communion on the floor for anybody who would like it. There will be some steps. There are some steps right here. So you could walk through here if you want to do steps, but this is going to be the ramp. It'll be a hardwood ramp so that a person with any mobility issues get in there. Yeah, Debbie.
For communion, will we be able to kneel, or will we only stand?
Yes. Oh, good. Yes. So the communion rail will basically be made into a great big kneeler like the clergy have, right? That's integrated into the like big piece of furniture. So you'll walk up and you'll kneel, or you'll stand. It'll effectively be the same dimensions as what you have right now with the same cushions.
Okay, and the entrance from the hallway, is that the same size door that we have now?
It is, and we wish we could make it bigger, but we can't. It really gets into that window and whatnot. And I'll talk about that too, along with the Bride's Walk, in just a second. Great questions. Church questions? Keep mulling. You can ask more. So let's turn the corner and talk about. Oh, that was a bigger picture of just the chancel. I could have had you see a little bit more about how things are going to lay out. You can see the font and the lectern and the pulpit and the ramp. Okay, phase 2 is where the more complex work was going to happen. And those priorities, one way of capturing them is an accessible entrance from 2nd Street, which is going to be how the Bride's Walk functions. Renovations of the parish house, keeping the charm and warmth of the Great Hall and other areas over there. And then the 1993 education building to the south that's going to now have offices and more activity on the first floor and organ room. So we'll walk through those a little bit, but we'll start here. We'll start with the 2 questions closest to here, right? As we leave this room, we'll stay on the 2nd floor. Jan asked about the Bride's Walk, which is Calvary insider language for that little bitty walkway, beautiful oak walkway along the back, but it has a few steps and it's about this wide. That would be this area right in here, right? We're coming out of the church and now we're heading down toward the Great Hall. This is the other 2nd Street entrance. Everybody kind of oriented as to how this is working? So this wall on the Bride's Walk is heading towards 2nd Street to create a wider entrance and room so that there's a ramp instead of steps. So Yvette has been campaigning for a narthex that more than 4 people can stand in for all of her life. And this will be a spacious entrance here, but you can come either. Let me put that other one up too to remind you. See, you can also come into the main entrance of the church, and now there will be an opening into this area as well. Second benefit of this is actually a better picture for the Bride's Walk anyway. Up a ramp that's tucked between the 2 buildings from the outside and in, or into the red doors of the church, and here it is right off to your right. The second great thing about this is if you're entering the red doors of the church for the first time as a family with someone who needs the nursery, you don't have to take that little child to the furthest place from you in our buildings and not even know how to get back to your child after the church, which is the case right now. It's really hard to get from that to the back door where the children are left. I have had that conversation with people. I've watched the kind of blank stare that comes from their faces when they say, where are you taking me? Because the new nursery will be right down this hall on the right over here. And the bathroom will. So, ushers, you'll get to say, it's the 3rd door on the right. You won't have to take somebody else to use the restroom by the hand to the restroom and then hope they find their way back into the church after that. So, it's the little things, Maslow. Does that make sense? Did you have other questions on that, Jan? Yes, finding it and getting through it. So this is a major change in accessibility and function. And if you think about this just as whoever you are, all of a sudden, all the parking on the street that way becomes very close to the front door of the church if you can actually get in the church. Our very own parking space that's all the way over there on B.B. King is actually quite a bit further away, unless you just want to come through the back door. So it also provides more access for more people just to available street parking that's going to increase, we're told. Second entrance is this over here. This is the library currently. Now we're going to put a ramp. As I've said a few times, at Lenten preaching, it's very clear how poorly this works. You have to have an usher standing in front of the library doors, telling people to go that way, and then you have to have someone standing in front of the steps up to the sacristy saying, no, don't go up these steps, the church is that way. So we're not going to put people out of work, but there's better things to do than be standing 4 steps away from somebody. We're opening this space up to put the ramp inside the room effectively, so that you'd come straight down the hall from the elevators and straight into the double doors that are currently in front of you, right? If you're walking into the library now, that's where the hall ends. But as soon as you stepped into those library doors, you'd be able to see that door, right? And you can either walk across and up a couple of steps or up this gentler ramp that will have a hard surface and not carpet. Jerry Scruggs has told me numerous times that we don't understand how much harder it is to move a chair across carpet than a hard surface, even if the ramps meets code. I've learned a lot about this over the course of this. So a hard surface coming up through here. 2 really important ways that we connect the buildings to one another there. Anything there before we roll down further on around the corner? So we still have this main loop. So church is up here, Great Hall is here. Great Hall's a little bit shorter, basically the depth of the stage, right? That becomes hallway. This was Montgomery Foyer. The floor comes up over here so that it's accessible from, it's larger and accessible from here. Library space. We'll decide what feels most library-ish. We're going to keep the library in one of those 2 spaces, the warmth of the books and the shelves and whatnot. But that's the piece that didn't have the lovely double high ceiling that kind of broke the budget. Nursery, children's classrooms, kind of as they are, except as we saw in that early picture, they'll be actually open to where we can see what's going on there. The nursery's right here. Right down here on your right is where you take your little one from the front doors if you're coming in. Choir room stays essentially the same. We were able to keep this concept of bringing down to the floor all of the vesting, and that delivers the 3rd floor. These are all have been in the plans all along, so I'm taking you through things that we've already talked about. But better bathrooms, better entrance. You don't have to worry about a door coming and knocking you out in the hallway outside Crump Parlor. Anybody watch that happen a time or two with those doors swinging out? That's the 2nd floor. We also kept in hardwood for the floors just to keep this continuity. We heard we want patina. We want it not to be so obvious you're moving from one foreign building to another. So one place we kept priorities that if we could keep a floor like this, it's not outrageously expensive upgrade. Keep that loop all the way around on the 2nd floor. I have a sense that I'm in the same place, in the same place. Now we're going downstairs, right? And this gets to Fred's question, too, about the entrance. Some of what we kept put, this is just existing organ room space, right? We just add this staircase here, and instead of the glass blocks, we have open railings so we can see what's going on, and the folks who are in there feel they've got natural light coming in from the skylights as well. So the entry from the outside, this is going to be glass coming into offices for the staff. So we won't be hidden away on the 4th floor 100 miles away when you come in during the week. More common spaces, as was in the original. But this is the principle I was saying that we instead of a large entrance to draw you into that central atrium, I come into the first door, the second door. This can't be glass, but right here it will be activity. This is where the reception desk will be. It'll be movable if we decide to put it out into the hall. And that gets me halfway into this nicely, beautifully lit atrium that's currently the organ room. This hall's widened as well to kind of help draw folks into that. This is the chapel space. It's only 1 story high, but it has a different ceiling treatment. We're actually going to take some of the marble pieces in the chapel under here, the old chapel, and move them over there and use them. There's a beautiful lectern and a font that can live in that space, and we're going to experiment with if we get a base for the marble top for the altar in there to kind of bring those back in. We're also going to backlight the Dorothy Sturm windows and put them along this wall. It's actually partly underground, is why we can't just make them windows to the sidewalk on 2nd Street. This is 2nd Street. So you'll come into this chapel, and I think it's 4 of those windows. Is that right, Charles and David? 4 of those windows will be along this wall, really anchoring it. They're beautiful. If you haven't seen them, there's a good chance you haven't seen them because they're down the hall in the outreach space right now in the old chapel. What am I missing? Dining room is going to stay. We left structurally even just some stuff that'll be about the same size as it is. We were going to change some of the walls. We said leave all the walls you can and still improve the surfaces. New floors, the doorways coming in here, the mural moved back over here so that we can make way for this entrance. If you can visualize the difference that'll make for Waffle Shop, it's hard to overstate. Rather than this little narrow passage in and out, people gathering in here, and they'll figure out the best circulation for that. Kitchen gets all new appliances freshened. The dish room's going to move over here so that we can really open up for drink spaces and have a much more flexible space there. I'm rambling. Questions on that part? Yeah, Cap. Okay. Good question. There's not another elevator. There's a new elevator in that space. So you still have the elevators right here, right? This is going to be the main back entrance. It's really still pretty close to the organ room, right? It's halfway around here. So this will still be our only elevator. It's still $200,000 just to get a new elevator in the shaft we had. So to put a new one in was astronomical. And we made sure that that's sufficient for the pressure we have on the building, and we're well below what the architects and the engineers said that what you need to have for the number of people and the square footage in the building. Make sense? Other questions?
Are there still stairs? Are there still stairs across from the old elevator?
There are. That stairwell will stay there. Yep. Yeah, that's still important for egress, and some people will still use those, but they won't be your main way to get from the first floor to the second floor.
The outreach space?
Yes. Let me show it. Suzanne, you had a question too. The courtyard.
Will the courtyard be more accessible, more part of our life, so to speak?
The courtyard will also be more accessible. One of the ways it will, that Charles has mentioned a few times, is that by bringing the level up with pavers that can be removed to repair it, that's going to bring it closer. We don't need as much ramp. But we'll have the same doors from the Great Hall in there. And it will be more visible from the library because it will be, that space will be more public space that will be used a lot. The outreach space. So this is where it got really complex. Our plan had been, we wanted to put some showers in here, and then we were going to make this space work more efficiently by having a circular, closed closet needs needs wall space and room to walk past it. So it's not all about square footage. It's about path and how we can have hanging and make it work efficiently. Well, that looks pretty easy from here until you realize what's built down in the ceiling. This is the structure of the church is underneath there. There's ductwork. There's all kinds of stuff. So even just connecting those rooms like we had hoped to was a mess. Also, the plumbing and everything it took to get these showers and restrooms across the hallway was a mess. And it was a huge number that we said, if we can still make all of this tie together in with the building, put new floor coverings and paint, let's make sure that the outreach does. We were going to have this be common space that would be used by different folks during the week when we felt like outreach could flow through their own spaces much more easily, and then stage it on Sunday for special things. Let's make sure that outreach has access to that, the old chapel, all the time, because they're just going to need more square footage if they're just going back into closets and whatnot. Catherine and I have talked about it programmatically. We have the rooms we need to run the programs we have in the space without it. So it's still going to be great space. These will not, instead of restrooms, we're working on a solution in here to still create an accessible restroom. These are tiny restrooms. And these are tucker room, other closets, if y'all know them by name, mid-sized rooms that'll be available as well down here. There was a bunch of work over in here that's hard to picture that had steps up and over and just very expensive, complicated work for the marginal benefit, especially since we've got some showers just across the way over here now for whoever needs them.
100 Main, and what kind of input they're going to have on us and we on them. Have we had that conversation?
With regard to what in 100 North? What kind of impact?
Well, what they're going to do and what we're doing.
Yeah. We have been in conversation. I was invited to serve on the RFP, the committee that receives proposals for 100 North Main, so we've been actually involved in just seeing what might happen, and then the ultimate choosing of Kevin Woods and Billy Orgel as the developer. So I'm excited that we have folks who love Memphis and care about Memphis that are going to own that building. How it interacts, questions around that has to be a public parking component across the street, has to be good, accessible, and safe. The fact that we can now enter from 2nd Street, no matter how you get around through the world, will make that more viable for us, for people who are coming to Calvary for whatever. So there are some really, besides just not having people throw things out the window onto our church any longer, there are some other real benefits just in the way the two buildings can communicate and share resources. We're excited to have that come online. Prayers ascend. We should write a prayer for that, Catherine. Yeah, good question. Other questions about this segment? We've made our way through the spaces since we took 3rd and 4th. We are going to do some simple work on the 3rd and 4th floor. Yvette's office and mine is going to be knock at the wall between them and let the bells have a beautiful space close to the elevator since they've got a lot of stuff to move. The youth are going to be on the 3rd floor, which, as I said, they're thrilled about. We're going to make sure that we stub up plumbing so that we could add a restroom there and maybe a kitchenette, hopefully during this project, but with a cheaper contractor. I mean, it's a simple project. It's more of a residential kind of project. So there's a few things like that we think we can do ourselves and save some resources. Others? I don't remember what else I put on here. Probably nothing. That's it. It took us until May to really get the numbers broken out in ways that we could work with and see where the costs were. Prior to that, we really just got ginormous numbers attached to large segments of the project. So I'm really proud of the way folks have kept the goal in front of us, kept the central genius of what we're trying to accomplish in front of us. And it's going to be an astonishingly different place that really, I think, flows out of who Calvary is, and help us be our best selves in Memphis. The mechanical? Well, I didn't show air conditioners on here. The whole everything's been assessed from top to bottom, everything that's at the end of its life. One of the things Matt Seltzer helped us do was realize that carbon is partly in the efficiency of your unit, but partly as carbon is in throwing. If you throw away a unit that still has life in it, you're not necessarily doing the sustainable thing. So everything has been assessed from top to bottom. This is about a 30-year-old, the south building is about a 30-year-old project. So that's putting all of that near the end of its life. There's about $1 million in this that's mechanical systems. So a lot of that, they'll be new, they'll be more efficient. What I thought we would do, Anna, yeah. Yeah, great question. So when we realized that we could do, two things happened. The church was doable at the scale. How can we make that happen right away was the first question. Let's peel it off and make it phase one. Earlier, the plan had been, yes, we would make sure we start in the church, but we'd probably start charging down all at once. That gave us the time to start redesigning the rest of it. Plus, the staff determined it was going to be so much easier, even if it's a little bit longer time frame, to finish in the church, then move into the rest of the work so we can worship in the Great Hall and do all the things. So that was the first thing. So the church project, Lord willing, ends right after Thanksgiving. We come in here and have the bishop come on the 12th to bless it and to confirm people. We're going to have evensong in here on the 3rd to celebrate the new space. We'll live into it through Christmas. And so the earliest we would start would be moving out early in the new year. That would be the earliest. But we're in conversation with everybody who's got things going on in here in Lent. Maybe it gets kind of busy in Lent, to figure out how we can find staging and how to make Lent at Calvary work. Everything from Mary and others have toured St. Mary's Cathedral and their facilities, to what could be set up on site, to Grizzlies Prep and their facilities. So anyway, long answer. This one gets us to Thanksgiving, this project. After the first of the year, after we've had Christmas and everything, sometime we'll tear into the rest. Yeah, Suzanne. Yeah, what about landscaping? So to get under budget, that was the other thing that we just lopped off. Now, we will do some things to make sure it's safe. We have a little bit set aside. Margaret even wrote a grant for a Tommy Pacello fund. That would be lovely to be able to honor Tommy and maybe liven up the staff parking lot, even in a basic way, as we hope to eventually make that a real plaza. We're also working on concepts, or on a process really, not concepts, with a group beyond Calvary to determine what happens with the former slave market site that was right up against the church. We now basically do we own the alley now? It's close. There's just a little paperwork in the city. It's been granted to us, so it's our space. That's an area that we think would be prime for some fundraising outside the church, since it's going to be something offered back to Memphis. But then the question of how to tie all of that together is fascinating, actually, to think about how to go from that site to our other public spaces. But we're going to get the stuff that we have to do in here. If halfway through this we start saying, you know what, let's talk about it. If it's there may be pieces outside that we want to make happen, and we find that there are folks within our church that can pull those resources together. But the responsible thing to do was to pull that outside off, because it really can happen later. Still have the plans, still have the vision. Okay, this leaves a few minutes, if you'd like, just to mill about and come up and ask questions and point. And Margaret and Charles and David were here. They decided I'd ramble today, but if you have specific questions, y'all, thanks for what you did to make this possible. A zillion people not only gave toward it, but threw parties and helped fundraise and have been in small groups that have figured out all of the many, many tiny, tiny questions that end up going into a project like this. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks.